Some house sits give you great views, some come with a friendly dog, and some come with a cat who disappeared decades ago. This particular house sit had me heading up to North Queensland to a bayside town that sounded perfect on paper. Tina and Glenn were the kind of couple who instantly put you at ease. Mid-50s, semi-retired, warm and unhurried. Tina had the kind of laughter that caught you off guard, and Glenn wore socks with his sandals like it was a proud statement. They both looked like they'd stepped out of a late 80s travel catalogue. Tina in a neon windbreaker and chunky white sneakers. Glenn in a zip-up parachute tracksuit and a bum bag slung proudly across his chest. When I arrived, they greeted me on the veranda with a plate of lemon slice and a rundown of their upcoming food and wine tour around South Australia. Their house was a lovingly restored Queenslander with high ceilings, polished timber floors, and a wraparound veranda that creaked just enough to sound charming instead of ominous. Tina had printed a copy of their itinerary and stuck it on the fridge like it was a school excursion. Glenn left a 6-pack of local pale ale on the bench and told me to help yourself, but watch out, they sneak up on you. I was looking after their Jack Russell, Barnaby, a wiry, cheerful old boy who looked like he hadn't taken a proper nap in years. His tail wagged like it was paid by the hour, and his bark sounded like it belonged to a much larger, more opinionated dog. We clicked instantly, though. That first afternoon, I noticed something odd. A grey and white cat appeared in the kitchen, calm, casual, like she lived there. She brushed against Barnaby like they were old friends. Later on, I found them curled up together in his bed, both snoring in sync like a pair of mismatched bookends. The thing is, I hadn't let a cat in. No windows were open, no doors ajar, and there was no mention of a second pet from Tina or Glenn. Later, when I ducked into the laundry, I noticed a second food bowl beside Barnaby's that I hadn't seen earlier. There was even a small bag of cat food tucked behind a tin of dog biscuits. I text Tina, "Hey, just checking in. Is there meant to be a cat here too, grey and white? She's lovely, keeps curling up with Barnaby." No reply from Tina. That first night, I ended up feeding her anyway, as I still hadn't heard from Tina. There was cat food, there was a bowl, and she clearly wasn't new to the routine. The next day, I settled in properly. I took a walk along the waterfront. Barnaby did a little routine of sniff, pull, bark, repeat. It was the Easter long weekend, school holidays, the kind of time when coastal towns are meant to be overrun with children, eskies and inflatable flamingos. This place was empty, no families, no noise, no ice cream trucks, no shrieking kids, just stillness. From the upstairs bedroom I was staying in, I had a view over the town. In the daylight, I could see a kids' playground nearby, faded yellow slide, rusted monkey bars, and a seesaw that looked like it hadn't been sat on since cassette tapes were cool. That night I woke around 1 a.m. to a faint creaking sound. Through the moonlight out of the window I saw it. The seesaw was moving slowly up and down, one of the swings rocking too, not wildly, just enough to suggest weight, movement. The park was empty, and there was no wind. I stood at the window for a long time watching. Eventually the swing settled, the seesaw stilled, and I went back to bed, though I'm not sure I slept properly again that night. By mid-morning the next day I decided to head into town. I needed a dose of normal, caffeine, a bit of chatter, anything. I stopped at a corner cafe, the kind with a handwritten chalkboard and a permanent smell of burnt milk. The woman behind the counter looked like she'd been there since decimal currency was introduced. Hair perfectly teased, apron too clean to be trusted, and a smile a bit too fixed. As she handed me my cappuccino, I joked, "It feels like I've wandered into a movie set after they've yelled cut. Where is everyone?" She didn't laugh. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "Have you been backstage yet?" Then she smiled, too wide, and added, "The directors are usually around." I burst out laughing, more from awkwardness than amusement, and when I looked back at her, she wasn't laughing, just watching me like she was waiting for me to take it seriously. I grabbed my coffee and left, quickly. Later that afternoon I saw her again, behind the counter at the fish and chip shop. Same apron, same smile, same shellacked hair. Still no customers, no sounds, and no signs of life. And as I walked back through town, I really started seeing it. Everything looked staged, not nostalgic, more abandoned. Deck chairs on balconies, towels draped just so, and wine glasses arranged like a set designer had placed them. It was school holidays though, Easter, perfect weather and still not one person outside, just a backdrop, a set, just stillness. And that's when I started seeing the same people again and again. A man in a wide-brimmed hat walking a bike like he couldn't remember how to ride it. A woman in pastel activewear power walking with a smoothie cup that never emptied. A couple frozen mid-argument, locked in the same gestures every time I passed them. At first I thought, small town, of course I'm going to see the same people on loop. It was repetition. Same clothes, same positions, same movements, day after day, like the town was buffering. Even Barnaby noticed it. He began stopping mid-walk, not barking, just staring, always at slightly ajar windows as if he sensed something watching back. On dusk that afternoon I tried to take a photo of the waterfront as the sun was setting. When I looked at the photo that I'd taken, the buildings were warped, slightly bent like a reflection in rippling water. I blinked, so took another photo, with the same result. Then the man with the bike stopped beside me. He looked at me like he was still buffering too, and said, "They don't like new routines." Then he smiled, not at me, just past me. I turned to see who he was looking at, and no one was there. When I looked back, neither was he. That night Barnaby was restless, pacing, huffing, watching the window. I opened the curtain and the playground was back in view, the same seesaw moving, slowly, deliberately. The trees were still, not a whisper of wind, and nothing else was moving. By the next afternoon, on my regular walk with Barnaby, I passed the town milk bar and paused at the old community notice board. Among the jazzercise flyers and lost budgie signs was a faded, missing pet poster. The paper was yellowing, the ink smudged from age. Bon Bon, a grey and white female cat, friendly, missing since April 1988. I stared at it for a long time. The cat in the photo looked exactly like the one I had been feeding at Tina and Glenn's. Same markings, same little pink nose. I just realised then that I had already started calling her Bon Bon without even knowing her name. That night, I scrolled back through Tina's original message. There was no mention of a second pet. I debated texting her again. I called her instead. Tina answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. "Hey," I said, keeping it light. "Just checking. Everything's fine and all. Just a quick question. I texted the other day. It mustn't have gone through to you. There's a grey and white cat here. I've been feeding her. She's curled up with Barnaby most nights. I wasn't sure if she's yours. I haven't left any doors or windows open for a cat to get in or out since you've been gone." There was a pause. Then Tina said, "Bon Bon?" "She's still there?" asked Tina. That's when the tone shifted. Tina didn't sound concerned. She sounded confused, like I'd just told her something physically impossible. "Bon Bon was our cat. She went missing years ago," she said. "Bon Bon disappeared right after we moved in. Posters went up everywhere. She never came back." I looked at the cat now curled beside Barnaby's bed, cleaning her paws like nothing was wrong. "Well, I've been feeding her since you left," I said. "She sleeps here. There's food in the laundry, a second bowl, and I hadn't left any doors or windows open for anything to get in or out after you left." There was a longer pause on the line. "We haven't had a cat in years," Tina said. "There shouldn't be anything in the laundry apart from Barnaby's dishes." And then static. The line dropped out. When I tried to call Tina back, I got nothing but that hollow ring. No voicemail, no tone, just an empty ring that rung out. I texted Tina again, no reply. Barnaby shifted and sat up and let out one sharp bark, staring at the door. And that's when I realised the swings outside were creaking again. The next few days blurred. I kept walking Barnaby, same streets, same people, same frozen gestures like no one had hit stop on whatever this was. The further I wandered, the more cracks I noticed. Cafes stood open, lights on, chairs out, music playing softly, with no one inside. I stepped into one with dusty pink booths and a cigarette machine bolted to the back wall. The smell was sweet and artificial, like strawberry syrup and time gone stale. A radio played "Take on Me" on low repeat, warbling like it had been chewed up by a Walkman. No staff, no customers, just the hum of something pretending to be alive. "Hello?" I called out. From the back room a voice echoed back, exact same tone, exact same pace. "Hello?" Not annoyed, not surprised, just automatic. I called out again, no reply this time. I didn't wait and turned and left. Later, I entered a newsagent where the chime rang like it still believed in customers. The shelves were lined with faded magazines, none of them newer than 1988. Headlines blared, Expo 88 a triumph, new cassette from Kylie Minogue and Halley's Comet returns. Near the counter, I found a missing persons board, dozens of photos, teens with mullets, women with feathered fringes, and men in cricket whites, all missing and all dated from the late 1980s. One photo fluttered, despite no breeze. Michael G., age unknown, last seen riding his bike on the Esplanade, 1988. Same face, same hat, same man I'd seen on the Esplanade when I was taking the photo at dusk. Another, the woman with the smoothie cup, same face, same cup, missing since 1988. And then there she was, the cafe woman, same shellacked hair, same stare. The caption read, Marnie G., last seen 1988, outside the very shop I was now standing in. It wasn't an old photo, it was her now. The posters rustled softly. I looked down and another flyer, a cat, grey and white tabby, responds to Bon Bon, last seen April 1988. Curled next to her in the photo was a Jack Russell on a Queenslander back step. The photo wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same stoop, same dog. It was definitely Barnaby in the picture. I wondered what was going on here and backed away. I didn't call out and I didn't wait. Everything suddenly felt relieved, like the town had been waiting for me to notice. The next day I passed a house I was certain hadn't been there before. Teal trim, 2 stories, a boy on the back steps, kicking at nothing. He looked up at me and didn't blink. I blinked and then he was gone, just grass. I stepped into the strange stillness. The sun hadn't moved and the clouds hadn't shifted either. By the final evening, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if the town had worn me down into something it could keep. I took Barnaby on his last walk, so we headed out and down to the fish and chip shop to get dinner, the only place that still felt tangible. The fluorescent lights buzzed, red stools lined the window, a Coca-Cola fridge hummed beside the counter. A sandwich board read, Pluto Pop and Chips, $3.20. I ordered a potato scallop and some calamari and extra lemon wedges. The girl behind the counter wore bubblegum eyeshadow and a name tag that read Tracy. She didn't write anything down, just nodded and disappeared out the back. While I waited, I wandered over to the notice board. Lost dog flyers, babysitting ads, and in the corner a brittle newspaper clipping from April 1988. Defense exercise abandoned after incident at sea. A grainy shoreline image with a caption, Unexplained energy surge disables communications. Locals report strange lights. Equipment failures. The government confirms radar testing with unexpected outcomes. Disruptions may continue. It was dated April the 12th, 1988, 37 years ago to the day. My order number was called out and I turned to get my food. Tracy was gone. Behind the counter stood the cafe woman. Same apron, same smile. She handed me my bag and said nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. Barnaby was pacing, not anxious, just tracing a shape only he could see. I got up to get a glass of water from the kitchen and walked down the hallway past the front door. I noticed a photo I must have passed a dozen times since I'd been there without really looking. It was Tina and Glenn, smiling on the front steps of the house, wearing the exact same outfits they'd worn when I'd first arrived. Tina in her neon windbreaker and chunky white sneakers, Glenn in his zip-up parachute tracksuit and bum bag slung proudly across his chest. The photo was dated April 1988. They looked exactly the same. Not younger, not aged, just the same. Barnaby sat beside me watching it too. Then, suddenly, the sound of wind chimes. They hadn't moved in days, and now they tapped softly, but there was no breeze, just that sound. Clink, 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 like someone was standing just outside the door tapping them. I didn't look out the window, as I didn't want to know, so I headed into the kitchen with Barnaby, where I sat at the table until the sky finally lightened. By the time the sun came up and lit up the morning sky, I'd packed and tidied up. Tina and Glenn were coming home late that night, so I needed to make a start on my own journey. Barnaby watched me quietly as I zipped up my suitcase, watching me with those same alert eyes, as if he knew, as if he'd seen others leave the same way. Bon padded silently into the room. She paused in the doorway, eyes calm, tail flicking like she knew I was leaving. She didn't approach, she didn't rub against Barnaby this time. She just sat there for a moment, unmoving, her eyes fixed on me in a way that made my skin prickle. Then, without a sound, she turned and disappeared around the corner. By the time I glanced towards the laundry, her bowl had been nudged, a few biscuits missing, just enough to know she'd been there. For a second I wondered if I'd imagined seeing her photo on the notice board at all. I gave Barnaby one last pat on the head, whispered a little thank you, and quietly closed the front door behind me. The wind chimes tapped, clink, clink. There was no breeze, just that sound. As I drove slowly through the town as I left, I half expected someone or something to try and stop me. The streets were quiet. At the intersection near the milk bar, I hit a red light. No cars, no traffic, just silence. A bus stop nearby caught my eye. A laminated timetable fluttered on the pole, and beneath it a locals events notice board. One flyer stood out. It was for a community morning tea, the kind with raffle tickets and Devonshire tea. What caught my attention was the date printed at the top, April the 13th, 1988. Someone had updated the details in pen. Venue changed, new contact name. The year hadn't been touched, like it didn't matter, like no one noticed. I stared at it for a long time, then turned my gaze to the street. The same man with the bike stood at the opposite corner. This time he wasn't alone. Across the road from him and just beyond the milk bar, the woman from the cafe was sweeping the same patch of footpath over and over, even though there was nothing there. Further down, the woman in the pastel activewear was mid-stride, holding that same smoothie cup to her lips, frozen again. A curtain twitched in an upstairs window. Another face, someone I hadn't seen before. All of them still and watching. The traffic light turned green and I drove on. At the edge of town, just before the highway, I passed a welcome sign. Welcome to Woodpine, where time stands still. It had always struck me as quaint, charming even. This time, though, someone had spray painted over the bottom half of the sign in shaky black letters. Don't forget your lines. I didn't stop and I didn't look back. I think whatever happens there never really stopped. And some towns, maybe they just don't want you to leave, they just want you to play your part. Maybe Woodpine wasn't really a town at all. Maybe it was a set to look like what was lost. Maybe after the experiment, after the real residents vanished, they filled the place with actors, people chosen to play characters running scenes they can't stop. The script set in motion decades ago, the cast interchangeable, the story recycled. And once you're there, even for a weekend, you're a part of the production, whether you realize it or not. Because regardless, the show must go on. Later that night, when I got home and unpacked, I found a folded napkin in my bag from the fish and chip shop where I'd got dinner the last night. On the napkin, written in blue pen, just one line: "Thank you for your performance." No signature and no clue who left it. I stood there for a while, napkin in hand, while the fridge buzzed softly behind me. I didn't understand any of it. Maybe that wasn't the point. Some stories don't need endings, just exits, and I'd made mine. Exit stage left indeed. Thanks for listening to The House Sit Lost in Time. If you enjoyed this soft-spoken story, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with a fellow lover of quiet chills. There'll be more eerie house sits just around the corner. Until then, good night.